biggest games, the best performances, expert analysis. You are Locked On Now.
What's going on, everybody? You're listening to Locked On Now, local experts on the biggest stories throughout the NFL. I'm your host, Daniella Bruce, and thanks for making Locked On Now your first listen every weekday. On today's show, we'll recap all the biggest results from Sunday around the NFC. A lot happened in the conference. A lot happened all around the NFL this weekend, but we're going to start with our biggest game.
The biggest game.
It's a battle for the NFC North. The Green Bay Packers and the Chicago Bears squared off, and Aaron Rodgers does what Aaron Rodgers does. Green Bay came out on top with a final score of 24-14, and the Packers now control the NFC North. But Aaron Rodgers had another message for Bears fans. Let's check in with Peter Bukowski of Locked On Packers.
I still own you. That was Aaron Rodgers' message to Bears fans, and he was right. I'm Peter Bukowski, host of Locked On Packers. Aaron Rodgers threw for 2 touchdowns and ran for another one. That one, the clincher, followed by the discount double check as the Packers get a 24-14 win on Sunday in Chicago. And Aaron Rodgers, he is absolutely right. He owns the Chicago Bears. 21-5 coming into the game against the Bears, and 10-3 are the Packers against the Bears in the Aaron Rodgers era at Soldier Field. And the key to this game was the Packers finding their identity. They played more under center. Both A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones ran for over 5 yards a carry. That sets them up with the hard play action and gets the tight ends involved. It gets Devontae Adams involved, Aaron Jones in the passing game as well. And the Packers look to be hitting their stride. 5 straight wins after an embarrassing week 1 loss that is looking more and more like a game we can just dismiss.
As Peter said, the Packers have won 5 straight. They are now 5-1 on the season, and the Bears, on the other hand, fall to 3-3. Penalties were a problem for Chicago throughout this game, but there was still some bright spots that Chicago fans can be excited about. Let's check in with Lauren Cox of Locked On Bears.
Bears fans saw a glimpse of what the future could look like with Justin Fields, but the rookie quarterback not ready yet to outduel Aaron Rodgers. I'm Lauren Cox from the Locked On Bears podcast. After a tough Week 6 loss for the Chicago Bears, a big NFC North matchup, team came out strong, an 80-yard touchdown drive early in this game. Offense was in control, defense was playing well, but over time, Aaron Rodgers wears you down, and even though the Bears were able to still run the ball well, felt like their receivers weren't getting open. Fields wasn't finding open guys downfield, despite an injured Packers secondary. And you just felt a little bit of the talent deficit between these two teams at very different stages of the team building process. The Bears seem to be still taking steps forward from a really catastrophic start to this season, but so much of this hinges on the development of Justin Fields over time. And he'll continue to get better. He continues to make these throws that you want to see a rookie quarterback progress in, but then there's the mistakes, the ones that he should hit, the ones that you scratch your head a little bit here and there, and then, of course, so much pressure with number 12 staring you down on the other sideline. Just a little bit too much for Fields, but definitely still seeing some bright future ahead with some of the throws that he made in this game. And the Bears will live to fight on another game. For more in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis, check out the Locked On Bears podcast, free and available on all platforms 5 days a week.
Chicago will head to Tampa Bay to take on Tom Brady and the Buccaneers, and the Packers will welcome the Washington football team to Lambeau Field. We saw some excellent performances around the NFC, but here is the player that we think had the best performance.
The best performance.
Hold up.
As a Lions fan, sometimes it pains me to talk about how well Matthew Stafford is doing in LA, but I also love it at the same time. He deserves it, and he is playing so well for them, leading the Rams to be 5-1 on the season already. Stafford went 22 of 28 for 251 yards, 4 touchdowns, and just 1 interception against the New York Giants today. We're going to bring in Sosha Kremenjas of Locked On Rams, who has more on the success we're seeing.
The Los Angeles Rams may have just came off their most dominating victory this season I'm Sosa Kremenjas, your host of the Locked On Rams podcast, and the Rams improved their record to 5-1 on the season with a 38-11 victory over the New York Giants. It was a successful day for pretty much the entire team. Quarterback Matthew Stafford led the way with 4 passing touchdowns on the day. Running back Darrell Henderson, 2 touchdowns of his own, 1 on the ground, 1 through the air. And then the defensive side of the ball, we talked about the defensive line coming up this week. Could they convert some of those pressures into sacks in this game? And that's exactly what they did. They registered 4 sacks of their own in this contest as well. So the Rams came out victorious, now head home to LA, getting ready for a battle against former quarterback Jared Goff and the Detroit Lions. For more on this contest, as well as what's coming for the Rams next week, visit the Locked On Rams podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
Matthew Stafford and Jared Goff playing against their former teams and each other next week. You're definitely going to want to be tuned in to that matchup. So the Rams improved to 5-1 on the season. The Giants fall to 1-5, and the struggles continue for quarterback Daniel Jones. We'll bring in Patricia Traina of Locked On Giants for more.
New York Giants were completely outclassed, outplayed, whatever you want to call it, by the Los Angeles Rams, who scored 21 points off of turnovers en route to a 38-11 victory that drops the Giants to 1-5 for the season, and which, more importantly, deepens the dark cloud already hanging over this franchise. Giants quarterback Daniel Jones, back from his concussion suffered last week, had his worst showing as a pro, completing 29 of 51 pass attempts for 242 yards and a passer rating of 44.7, the second lowest mark of his career. But it wasn't all on Jones, who, in addition to being without running back Saquon Barkley and receivers Darius Slayton and Kenny Golladay, lost rookie Kadarius Toney in the first quarter to an ankle injury, and who also had to play behind a revolving door of offensive linemen at tackle and left guard. And speaking of injury, left tackle Andrew Thomas had to leave the game with an ankle injury suffered in the first half. Be sure to keep it here on the Locked On Giants podcast for more on this latest disaster and what's ahead for the Giants.
So the Giants were riddled with injuries this week. Hopefully that improves for them in the coming weeks. We are going to take a quick break, but we'll be back with everything NFC on this edition of Locked On Now. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Daniella Bruce, and this is Locked On Now. Let's take a look around the league.
Let's go around the league.
The Detroit Lions welcomed Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals to Ford Field earlier today, and Dan Campbell was very obviously emotional after last week's tough loss, last-second field goal loss for the Lions. A real heartbreaker, but I don't know if he is feeling any better after today's game. The Lions really couldn't get anything going, and they remain winless on the season. Let's head over to Matt Derry of Locked On Lions for more.
With you from the Locked On Lions podcast, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's final score. The Bengals have knocked off the Lions today 34-11. Detroit is now the only winless team remaining in the NFL at 0-6. They were outgained today 400 yards to 228. Really had no chance with the offense sputtering like they did out of the gate today. Jared Goff was terrible, a passer rating of 67.8. Yes, some fourth quarter touchdowns, 1 touchdown and a field goal late. But the Lions, again, shut out in the first half for the 4th time this year. They fall 34-11 of the Bengals to drop to 0-6, and it does not get any easier next week. They got to face Matt Stafford and the Rams in LA. Locked On Lions postgame pod coming your way next, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network.
Again, highlighting that Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford matchup, the Lions and the Rams next week. That is definitely going to be a highlight of the NFL next Sunday. The Washington football team had the tough task of welcoming the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. Here is Locked On Washington football team's Chris Russell with more on that game.
What's up, Washington football team fans? I'm Chris Russell here at FedEx Field, where we just watched the Washington football team get trounced by the defending AFC champion Kansas City Chiefs 31-13. They did have a 13-10 lead at the half. After that, Kansas City rolled 21-0 in terms of points in the second half, which is kind of ironic considering Washington celebrated the life and the legacy of Sean Taylor by retiring his number 21 in a brief pregame and a full halftime ceremony today here at FedEx Field. There was no divine intervention in that second half for Washington, again, as they were outscored 21-0. Taylor Heineke, 24 of 39, a $182, a touchdown and a pick. Patrick Mahomes, almost 400 passing yards. Did have a couple of interceptions, one his fault, one not his fault. 32 of 47, a couple of rushing touchdowns for Kansas City as well mixed in, and they pull away and win this one again by the final score of 31-13. Washington now 2-4, again heading to Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers, Lambeau Field, and the Green Bay Packers next week. More reaction and immediate analysis coming up on the full-length Locked On Washington Football Team podcast with me and David Harrison. That's all for now. Thanks for watching Locked On Now.
Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins, and the still undefeated Arizona Cardinals with an impressive win over the Cleveland Browns. Bo Brock and Alex Clancy have more.
Stop sleeping on the Arizona Cardinals. They absolutely just blew the doors off the Cleveland Browns 37-14 to improve to 6-0, remaining the only undefeated team in the NFL, keeping that champagne on ice from the 72 Dolphins. Bo Brock, Alex Clancy. Alex, who stepped up the most for the Arizona Cardinals with so many absences across this roster to continue the unbeaten streak?
I mean, the hodgepodge conglomerate of coaches that took over for head coach Cliff Kingsbury. You got to start with the top. You know, the play calling was great. There was the early play call, the delayed handoff. I think there was a check at the line from Kyler that sprung Chase Edmonds early on in this game, and that was it. Like, that was it. They turned over Baker a couple times. J.J. Watt was great in the backfield. Jordan Hicks had 2 sacks. Like, this was a, quote, team effort. When your quarterback's not there, when your best pass rusher, arguably Chandler Jones, isn't there, when the best offseason acquisition you've had, Rodney Hudson, isn't there, it's a team effort. They blew the doors off a team that almost went to the AFC Championship game last year.
And they didn't play scared. They played physical, and they kept their foot on the gas pedal the entire way to improve to 6-0. People you're running out of excuses about this Arizona Cardinals team. Up next for them, is it the Houston Texans? Could 7-0 be in the cards for the Cards? We're breaking it all down this week. Locked On Cardinals. It's Bo. It's Alex.
I think 7-0 definitely is in the cards for the Cards. They have been very impressive leading up to this point. The Vikings, on the other hand, had another dramatic finish after beating Detroit with a last-second field goal last week. This week's matchup with the Carolina Panthers went into overtime. Let's check in with Luke Braun.
Look at this. I'm shaking. Why does this team always do this to me? What's up, everybody? Luke Braun here from Locked On Vikings, coming fresh off of the Vikings walking off the Carolina Panthers. Final score of 34-28 in a back-and-forth game where both teams were hell-bent on shooting themselves in the foot and handing the team to the other game. We had blocked punts, untimely penalties, Sam Darnold throwing interceptions and getting strip-sacked, all sorts of mess. The offense was asleep for most of the game, but to their credit, the final overtime drive was fantastic. They walked right down the field and scored. The defense, kind of the opposite, dominated for most of the game, but then gave up a 2-score lead late in the game, including a 2-minute drive where Sam Darnold, of all people, walked down the field 96 yards, scored, got a 2-point conversion, and then they failed to get the field goal at the end. But all in all, a win's a win. The Vikings claw their way back to 500 and head into the bye on a 2-game winning streak, which will help a lot for Mike Zimmer's job, which is very much still in question as this year moves forward. For more on this, on all the details you need, check out the Locked On Vikings podcast, free on all platforms.
Thank you all for tuning in, and thanks for making Locked On Now your first listen every weekday morning. Make your second listen Locked On NFL. For breaking news and expert analysis, make sure you stay tuned to Locked On Now.